to the battle. Put our armor on, draw our swords. Let's run to the battle. Shout loud and glorify the Lord. Let's run to the battle. Put our armor on, draw our swords. Let's run to the battle. Shout loud and glorify the Lord. Come on, run. Let's run. Let's run. Run.
Well, what an honor to get to talk to you about two areas of relationships that are unbelievably important. If we're desirous to have relationships that honor the Lord, that are just, those strong families, and that's really what I get to do as a day job. I'm president at strongfamilies.com, and we see all the time wonderful, great, awesome people. And I'm telling you, they are struggling. Not that they don't love the Lord and they started off great, but boy, all of a sudden it's like you wake up one day and you're miles apart. And when that happens very often, it's because, again, you haven't resolved conflicts, or you haven't really moved towards, if you have really, started to strain out, how do you really begin to pull things back together and restore relationships? So I want to talk about both of those, okay? First of all, let's jump right in and talk about resolving conflict. Now, the first thing I want to share with you is that for so many of us, we think, boy, you look at the movies and it's all fantastic, but in every relationship, there are predictable areas of conflict. And part of what that is all about is there was a clinical study recently, hundreds of couples, and guess what they came up with? 37% of the conflicts that people get in, 37% are situational. What that means is something comes up and you and your wife, for example, are just really at ends on this. But what does that mean? That means 67% of the time, 67% of the time it is, it's not situational, it's systemic, meaning it's just differences. Well, here's the problem with that. Guess why most people marry is because they're different than the other person. And my wife and I, for example, we're the world's most opposite couple. She's left-handed, I'm right-handed. I'm a night person, she's a morning person. Cindy's more of a saver, thank goodness. I'm more of a spender. She wants the toilet paper to go off the top of the roll. I just want it there. I don't really care otherwise. But what I'm getting at is, man, what happens with so many of us, the thing that attracts us are differences. So really what that means is it's kind of like we're the world's most opposite couple. But guess what? I bet you and your bride are the same way. And what differences can do very often is bring that conflict out. So number one is realize conflict is systemic. It's just part of a relationship. But what Almighty God does is that he places you with somebody. I want to read you something, a great passage in 1 Corinthians. It says, now, the body is not one member, but many. And if the foot should say, well, I'm not a hand, therefore I'm not a part of the body, well, is it not for this reason any less a part of the body? Or if the ear would say, I'm not an eye, well, hey, just because it says that, is it still not a part of the body? Well, no, what it's getting at is that, hey, we're not all the same people. We don't always have the same strengths. In fact, listen to this. This is so important. But now God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body just as he desired. So number one is we're going to have conflict. Number two is that God has placed us with people with differences. Now, hear me on this, not to defeat us, but to complete us. Now, once you understand that, you have a huge biblical key on dealing with conflict. Because once you begin to realize, oh my gosh, that person that God placed in my life isn't just doing it, isn't different just to frustrate me. When we look at them sometimes, it's so easy to look at them as like an impediment. And let me give you an example. Let's get real practical. Let's say you're on a baseball team and you're dealing with a problem, which is the ball's just been hit. Well, if you're an infielder, what do? What's your first step? Do they coach you? Well, if you're an infielder, you react, right? You're just going right for the ball. But hang on a minute. If you're an outfielder, what do you tend to do? You tend to step back. You take one step to the side or back. Now, not if it's a streaming, line drive, but if it's a fly ball, what do they coach you? To take a step back. Well, think about, again, in a couple relationship. I tend to step towards problem. My wife tends to step away. Well, what can you do? You can go, well, man, why are you stepping back from that problem? Well, maybe we shouldn't even deal with the problem, or she wants to talk about it and discuss it, not just solve it right there. And what we can begin to do is forget the fact, for most of us, we say, well, hey, we want it my way. And in fact, it's my way or the highway. But really what God does is place us with somebody different than us. How come? Not to defeat us, but to make us a better team. The best teams have both. The best teams have infielders and outfielders. That's what makes a winning team. Okay, forget the baseball analogy. Go with track if you want that. You've got one person that's wants to really speed up. Hey, we need to make a decision right now, and so they're ready to speed up. But to make the handoff in a relay race, the other person is slowing down. And where does all the problems come in a relay race? It's right at the handoff. We're all going to have struggles and problems. Okay, it's just we tend to be with somebody that's different than us. But Almighty God placed them there, not to defeat us, but to complete us. Once you understand all that, now you're ready to really deal with conflict. You're valuing the other person. And then here's the other thing. In Song of Solomon, chapter 2, there's a great verse that says and it's Solomon's bride that's saying it. She goes, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that are ruining the vineyard. Now, what in the world's that all about? She's saying, look, we have these small problems, but guess what? The small things can really ruin something really big. And so what we coach people to do when it comes to conflict is value each other first, but then you want to deal with three steps. So watch this. There's an issue, then and then person, and then a relationship. Issue, person, relationship. So stay with me. Here's Cindy and I, and let's say we have an issue that comes up, and for us it could be anything, but let's say it's, it could be kids or finances, but let's say it's save, spend. I want to spend something, she wants to save something. Well, if you don't solve the issue, what can you do? You can move up to level 2. That's when you begin to attack the person. Well, why are you being such a skinflint? We need to do that. Well, why don't you be more, of a better steward? Well, why don't you be more submissive? Well, that's out of context. Well, your mother's out of context. And so now what have you done? You've gone into, you're off the issue. You're attacking the other person. And then stay with me on this, because guess what you can also do in your mind? You can move up to level 3. And that's when you start saying, well, if these are the kinds of issues we have, and if you're this kind of person, then what in the world am I doing in that relationship? And what happens, what we see all the time is people where it's gone from an issue, it goes right to level 3, and I'm out of here. And again, I grew up in a family where people bailed out. They didn't work through conflict. So be sure that you value that other person, because Almighty God placed them there. And then say, Lord, you know what? I'm going to stay at level 1. If I'm up at level 2, I'm going to apologize and move back down to level 1, and let's deal with that. And then what restores relationships? Remember, we're going to look at conflict and restoring relationships. And so just one quick thing there, which is, guess where it begins? It begins with untying the knot. Now, what does that mean? Well, I was a Greek major at Dallas Seminary because I got some bad advice. I majored in Greek. Actually, it was a great learning thing, but I was a new Christian and didn't even know that, that majoring in New Testament meant you majored in Greek. But the first Greek verb you learn is luo. And it's the word for forgiveness. And guess what it means? To untie the knot. And so when we don't forgive each other, it's like we're all tied up in knots. So you want to deal with conflict? Man, understand it's going to happen. Number one, it's also something that God has placed you with somebody that's different than you, not to defeat you, but to complete you. So you want to look at them as highly valuable, but then make sure you keep issues at the issue level, not move them up. And if you need to restore that relationship, then untie the knot.
Run to the battle. Put your armor on, draw your sword. Let's run to the battle.